Okay, hello everyone. First of all, thank you all for taking time out of your schedule and joining us today. This lesson will be brought to me by me, Wendy, and my partner,
Hi,
Doris.
hello everyone. My name is Doris, and Wendy will be doing most of the talking, and I will be answering your questions at the end of the seminar. So go ahead, Wendy.
Okay, thank you, Doris. So let's get started. So biology, we will mostly in this class be learning about the biosphere and the ecosystem, which in short is basically ecology. Ecology is just a branch of biology that studies the interactions of organisms. All right, let's go to the next slide. The introduction to the levels of organization. All right, so first we will be learning about the different levels of organization. So ecologists are people who study ecology. They study the environmental interactions at several levels, mostly organism level, population level, community level, and ecosystem level. All right, next slide. So what an organism is basically an individual living thing. They can be anything ranging from like a bacteria to an elephant. The next level we will be talking about is the population level, which is by definition an interbreeding group of individuals belonging to the same species and living in a particular geographic area. So what this means is that basically population is a bunch of animals or organisms that are in the same species and they have to be close to each other. The same members of the species from two different areas on the globe cannot be counted as a single population. So the third level we will be talking about is community. It consists of all the organisms, of which are all the populations of different species that inhabit a particular area. So what a community is basically is just a bunch of population in a single area that can interact with each other. And the final level we will be talking about is ecosystem, which includes all the life forms in a certain area and the non-living factors as well. So the ecosystem is basically the community, but it also have things that are not living but still affects the living things, such as like rainfall and sunlight. Okay, next slide. Which of the okay, here we have a little question for you guys. There should be a poll. So, which of the following levels of biological organization includes all others in the list? Cell, population, organ, or community? Okay, so alright, I see most of you have voted for ecosystem, and that is correct. As I said earlier, the highest level of organization right now is the ecosystem. Many people pick the organ system because it probably also have a system in it, but what an organ system is just a bunch of different organs working together to provide function to the body. It does not include population, which is a bunch of different organisms, and a community. Okay, next slide, please. So right now we will go back into the organism more. So an organism, as I said earlier, is an individual living thing, usually made up of organs, organ system, tissue, cells, and molecules. Of course, there are other organisms that does not fit this description, like single-cell organisms such as bacteria. So some organisms that fit this type are fungus, plant, and animal. Okay, let's move on. So population. A population is made up of the organisms of the same species. They are fertile and can reproduce. They live in the same general area. So as you guys can see here, this group of organism right here is a population. So the important thing about a population is that they have to live in the same general area. let's take example as an animal like wolves. So wolves living on one side of the globe and the other side of the globe cannot be counted as a single population because they're not in the general area. Okay, so let's go on to the next level. A community is all the population of organisms inhabiting a particular area. So what a community is a bunch of populations in a particular area that can also interact with each other. Some community we will see might be wild turkeys, grass, shrubs, and trees in a deciduous forest. Okay, let's move on to the ecosystem. So the ecosystem is the interaction of the living and non-living things in an environment. So ecosystem is place. Ecosystem is also the interactions between the living and non-living things. Some living things might be like kelps, but some non-living things might be like the rainfall and the sunlight, like I said earlier. They still affect how an organism interacts and behaves, but they are not living themselves. So let's move on. So here we will have another question for you guys. What level of organization should a group of wolves be classified as? Okay, most of you have voted for community, which is correct, which is wrong actually. A group of wolves should be classified as a population because, as I mentioned earlier, a community is not a single species of animal. So wolf living in the same area can be only count as a population, while if we have wolves and bunnies and grass, that could be count as a community because they are different species that interact with each other. But a single species that interact with each other can only be count as a population. Okay, now moving on to the biomes. Okay, what is a biome? A biome is a large naturally occurring community of flora and fauna occupying major habitat. Let's move on to the next slide. Yes, okay. A biome is a large geographical area notable for the organism that adapted to the area. And an ecosystem is the interaction between the living things. So basically, the difference between a biome and an ecosystem is a biome is just the area, while the ecosystem is the interactions between everything in it as well. Right. Now we will learn about some different biomes. Next slide, please. Thank you. So first of all, we are introduced to the marine biome. Some physical features of the marine biome are the benthic area, which is the seafloor, the neritic area, which are the coastal area near the beach, the pelagic area, which are just open ocean, and another physical feature we have in the marine biome is that there are little light compared to every other biome. So location on Earth. So a lot of you might have known that the sea covers about 75% of the entire Earth. Some plants and animals that may inhabit this biome are fish, reptiles, mammals, arthropods, zooplankton, phytoplankton, and seaweed. So some mammals that might be in this biome are something like dolphins and whales. Not only fish can inhabit the ocean. So let's move on to another biome. So the next biome we have is the freshwater biome. Some physical features for the freshwater biome will be water with low salt. As everyone probably should know, ocean has a lot of salt density in the water, but freshwater biomes have less salt. So they might come in the forms of ponds, lakes, rivers, and even wetlands. So there are many places on land that has these freshwater biomes. They're usually in places with adequate rainfall. Some plants and animals that may inhabit this area are fish, amphibians, turtles, and even alligators. So next off, there should be another question for everyone to answer. Which kind of organism can only live in the freshwater biome? Okay, most people voted for amphibians, and that is correct because amphibians will dry out in bodies of water that has way too much salt in it. And birds cannot live in either freshwater or marine biome. Okay, let's move on to the next slide. Okay, so tundra. So some physical features for the tundra are temperature around 18 degrees Fahrenheit, and they get less than 5 inches of rainfall per year. They are similar to desert in terms of its dryness. They also have high winds and are cold. They have long cold winter, short cool summer. Some places on Earth, they are normally around the North Pole and around high mountain tops. They occupy about 20% of the land surface on Earth. So some plants and animals that inhabit this area are treeless lichens, moss, shrubs, permafrost, glazing musk, caribou, reindeer, bears, wolves, foxes, and migratory birds. So not a lot of trees can grow and thrive here because of its small amount of rainfall per year. Let's move on to the next slide. Coniferous forest. The physical features of a coniferous forest may include long cold winters, short warm summers, temperature around 40 degrees to 70 degrees Fahrenheit, and they get about 12 to 33 inches of rain per year. They're the largest terrestrial biome on Earth. They're not the largest biome because the largest biome is still the marine biome. Locations on Earth. They will be found in a broad strip across North America and Europe. So some plants and animals that may inhabit this forest are some conifers, spruce, fir, pine, again migratory birds, moose, brown bear, Siberian tigers. All right, we should have another question for you guys here. So in what ways are the coniferous forests and tundras similar? Okay, so the correct answer is long winters and short summers. This is because when I said earlier, uh, trees cannot thrive very well in tundras, and tundras do not have a lot of rainfalls per year. Let's move on to temperate deciduous forest. So some physical features are temperature around 50 degrees Fahrenheit, 10 inches to 30 inches of rain, and they get around 4 seasons every year. So locations on Earth, they're in the mid-latitudes in the northern hemisphere. They are in smaller areas in New Zealand, Australia. Plants and animals that may be in this are some oak, elm, ash, maple, beech, hickory, hibernating mammals such as bears, insects, and migratory birds. Okay, the next slide. So, tropical rainforest. Some physical features of a tropical rainforest may be high temperatures like 70 to 85 degrees Fahrenheit. They rain around 50 to 260 inches a year, and they're very humid. So right away you can tell the difference between a rainforest and a tundra in the amount of rainfalls they get annually. The locations on Earth. Almost all rainforests are found near the equator. So plants and animals that may inhabit a rainforest are tall trees, a lot of vines, canopy. Rainforests actually have poor soil. Amphibians may also live in rainforests. There will be tons of insects and arboreal animals, which are just animals that dwells on the trees. So we should have another question here. What makes a tropical forest unique from other forests? Okay, so the answer should be very simple. The tropical forests, as I mentioned earlier, are all found near the equator, and the tropical forest is very warm, so it's not cold at all, and it receives a lot of rainfall compared to every other biome, so it is not dry either. So let's move on. Grasslands. Some physical features for grasslands may be temperature of 40 to 70 degrees Fahrenheit, around 10 to 30 inches of rain. It has however, it has periodic drought. It has hot summers and cold winters. Locations on Earth. It may be found in South Africa, Hungary, Argentina, and Russia. Some plants are animals. Obviously, grasses will be in grassland, prairie dogs, large grazers, bisons, wild horses, and burrowing mammals. The desert. All right. So the deserts have dry, hot days and very cold nights. It has like the biggest range between temperature, 40 to 100 degrees Fahrenheit. They have less than 30 centimeters of rainfall annually. So locations on Earth, they are a band around the north and south latitudes. Some plants and animals that may be found in the desert are cacti, yucca, aloe, nocturnal rat, mouse, bat, snakes, lizards, insects. As you guys may have noticed, not a lot of animals come out during the day. That is because the desert is extremely hot in the day, and it is not efficient for an animal to go out during the day and try and survive and lose so much water. So we should have another question for you guys. About how much inches of rainfall does grasslands get annually? This one might be a little bit harder because it requires some memorization. Okay, so most of us pick 10 to 30 inches. That is correct. Grasslands get an adequate amount of rainfall. So it does not get 100 inches or 40 inches, and it does not get 5 inches of rainfall. So now we will learn about components of an ecosystem. An ecosystem contains living and non-living factors in an area, which can be also called biotic and abiotic components. So the living components, the living factors are called biotic, and the non-living are called abiotic. So the biotic components include organisms making up the community of species, and abiotic components include temperature, forms of energy, gases, water, nutrients, and other chemicals. So basically, abiotic components are just everything not living that can also affect the living things. So we will learn about how abiotic affects life. So solar energy powers nearly all surface terrestrial and shallow water ecosystems. So almost all ecosystems get their energy and chemical energy from the sun and solar energy. The distribution of light has a big impact on the growth and competition of photosynthesizers. Photosynthesizers are like plants and any other organisms that takes in sunlight and changes to energy. So next up we have water. Water is essential to life. Terrestrial organisms have watertight coverings that reduce water loss. Aquatic organisms need a balanced solute concentration of water. So everyone needs water to live. Terrestrial organisms have adaptations and watertight coverings that help them go further without water. So aquatic organisms also need a balanced concentration of water. If it's too salty or not salty enough, they cannot survive in the water. And then we also have temperature that affects metabolism. A few organisms can maintain a sufficiently active metabolism at temperatures close to 0 degrees Celsius, and temperatures above 45 degrees Celsius destroy the enzymes of most animals. So what this means is just that temperature affects how our body functions. If it's too cold or too hot, our body cannot function and we cannot survive. Next up, we have wind. Wind contributes to the patchiness and openings in an ecosystem, and it increases an organism's rate of water loss by evaporation. And lastly, we have disasters, which also count as a biotic factor because they also affects the biotic factors. Some disasters are like hurricanes, earthquakes, fires, and volcanic eruptions. All right, now we have another question. Which one of these is an abiotic component? Okay, so a lot of people picked rainfall. So rainfall is correct because the amount of rainfall an ecosystem or biome gets affects the living things in it. However, bacteria, fungi, and plants, they are all living organisms, which can only be counted as biotic components. So rainfall is the correct answer. Moving on, what is the biosphere? So as I said earlier, let's move on to the next slide. As I said earlier, ecosystem was the highest level of organization, but now that we learn about biosphere, which is the global ecosystem, basically every ecosystem on this planet, this is the most complex level in ecology as well as the highest level of organization. Okay, so the biosphere includes the atmosphere to an altitude of several kilometers, the land down to and including the lakes, rivers, and ocean. So pretty much everything is the biosphere. The biosphere itself is contained and closed except for photosynthesizers, absorbing energy and losing heat. So basically, Earth is what we will call a closed system. Normally, nothing goes in and nothing goes out. So some exceptions may be the plants absorbing the sunlight that comes from the sun, and then every one of us losing heat that eventually goes out into space. And some other exceptions are now that we have like rockets and all that can take us out of the biosphere. So the biosphere is also very patchy. On a global scale, it is distributed in continents and oceans. And on a regional scale, we see it on the distribution of deserts, grasslands, forests, lakes, and streams. So basically, the biosphere is not the same everywhere. There's a lot of differences in it, globally or regionally. Okay, so we have one last question for you guys. This one should be very easy. What is the biosphere we live in? Okay, so almost everyone have picked Earth, and that is correct because, as I mentioned earlier, the biosphere is the sum of every ecosystem on this planet. So Earth is correct. Venus is another planet that is closer to the sun than Earth. So it is not our biosphere and we do not live in it. And cities is not correct because the biosphere is the sum of all ecosystem. So this includes cities, but it is not limited to cities. So that's it for our presentation. Sorry if I went a little too fast. And do you guys have any questions?
So thank you so much for that, and thank you again for coming to the seminar. It was very nice to have all of you here to join us today. And yeah, and that's it for today. So have a great day, you guys, and thank you.